We're learning the Gemara. We begin today towards the bottom of Daf Yutes Amud Beis, the second line from the bottom. Zok the Gemara, Amar Rav Mari. Rav Mari said, Shma Mina, I can prove from our Mishnah the following halacha. Chulin shenasu al taras hakodesh. A person that is eating chulin, but his custom is that he treats the chulin that he eats with the same level of tara like it is when you eat kachim in the Beis HaMikdash. So then, kekodesh damu. So the level of tara that will be applied regarding this chulin will be the same like the level of kodesh itself. Because this person is so careful, b'negei to his chulin, like taras hakodesh, so therefore it'll actually have the halacha like kodesh itself, right? We had in the Mishnah various different levels that if you're careful for a level of chulin, so then for trumah it's still considered to be tameh. If you're careful with the level of trumah, so for kodesh it's still considered to be tameh. Right? L'mashal b'negei to the garments a person wears and other things, b'negei to the tefillah and a mikveh. But over here, b'negei to taras hakodesh, if a person is careful with his chulin on the level of taras hakodesh, so then, for example, his garments will be kodesh, will be tar, that is, even for kodesh. We're not talking about kavanah l'chayre. Over here, the main thing is l'mashal b'negei to the garments of the person. I think that the garments of the person that he wears and he's treating his chulin with taras hakodesh, so you'll be able to use those garments for kachim, and it's not going to be metama kachim. It's kodesh for kachim. It's tar for kachim as well. What's the raya for this? Zok the Gemara, because midalai tani buhu maila. Because regarding a person that eats al taras hakodesh, it's not mentioned in the Mishnah as a separate level. It's not mentioned separately, this level that the person that's eating on taras hakodesh is on a separate level. It mentions in the Mishnah that you have a person, big day amaretz, which is a person that's not careful with how he eats his chulin, he allows himself to become tameh, that's an amaretz. Then it mentions prushim. What are prushim? Prushim are the people that eat with the tara of truma. They eat things on the level of tara. They're careful like a person that eats truma. That's mentioned in the Mishnah. But a person that eats chulin and is careful like on the level of taras hakodesh, that's not mentioned in the Mishnah. Why isn't it mentioned in the Mishnah? So right now the Gemara understands. The reason is because he's anyways the same like kachim itself. So since he's on the same level as kachim itself, so kachim is mentioned in the Mishnah. So it's not necessary to mention chulin that's being eaten on taras hakodesh. Fragt the Gemara, but how do you know that's the reason why it's omitted? But perhaps, the reason it doesn't mention separately a person that eats his chulin al taras hakodesh, the damu l'truma, maybe because this person that eats his chulin on taras hakodesh, his level will be compared to a person that eats truma. So if it's compared to truma, hatani truma, it already says in the Mishnah the level of truma. Or v'i dami l'chulin, if you're going to say that this person that eats his chulin al taras hakodesh, that nevertheless he's still on the level of chulin. It's only tar for chulin, but hatani chulin, it already says the level of chulin. Right? So in other words, your point is that the Mishnah omitted this level. But how do you know that means that he's on the level of kodesh? Maybe it means he's like any of the other levels that I mentioned in the Mishnah, whether truma or chulin. And now the Gemara brings a braise where it clearly says this. The Tanya will learn a braise, chulin shenasu al taras hakodesh. A person that eats chulin and he keeps the chulin, he's careful with the chulin on the same level of tara like kachim, harehein kechulin. Nevertheless, the person, the garments that he wears, he's still on the level of chulin. Rabbi Elazar bar Tzaddik says, harehein ketruma, that it's on the level of truma, because he's being careful like taras hakodesh, so it's not going to be on the level of kachim, but at least we treat the person and the things that he does that it should be on the level of truma. So we see there was a clear machlokes in the Braisa about this question, and there it's either chulin or truma, but we don't treat him that he should be mamish on the level of kachim itself.
That's the tzugan of the Mishnah. The Mishnah is trying to tell you that if you have in mind, even for begadim, it does work.
Yeah.
And now he's saying...
We're not talking about kavanah of tefillah and a mikveh.
No, the second half of the Mishnah where it says begadim.
Yeah. No, so the question is, a person that's careful, but al taras hakodesh, yes. Do we treat that like the level of kodesh itself?
Why not?
Or because maybe sof it's chulin. Maybe it's not kachim, it's still chulin. So therefore we could say, as much as a person is careful, Chazal still kept it on the same level as every other chulin. Or we could say, no, Hayais is being careful, so Chazal allowed it to be on one level higher, like Truma, but not like Kachim itself. Sof, it's not Kachim. These are all Chumris Midrabanan, right? So the question is, how Chachamim treat Chulin, which a person is being careful, like Kachim? So now the Gemara brings a Sefer from the Mishnah. From the Sefer, we actually do see that Chachamim considered a person that's eating Al Taras HaKadosh to be like Kodesh itself. Elami Sefer, what did it say in the end of the Mishnah? Yosi ben Yezer haya chassid shebekohuna. Yosi ben Yezer was one of the Chassidim amongst the Kainim. V'haisam et pachtoi medres l'kodesh. And he ate truma, like Kainim that eat truma all the time, and he was careful with his garments to be tahir on the level of truma, but it's still considered to be tahir, tameh that is, for kachim. And then it said in the Mishnah, Yochanan ben Gudgede haya eichel al taras hakodesh. He was always careful with everything that he ate that it should be on the level of tara for kachim, kol yamav, all of his lifetime. V'haisam mit pachtoi medres lachatos. And his garment was considered to be tamei for chatos, which is for the waters of the para aduma. So what do you see from this last point here? Lachatos it was considered to be tamei for chatos for the para aduma, but l'kodesh loy. But for kachim, not. If you want to use those garments for kachim, it's not tamei. Almes, what I see from this is, kasava, the Mishnah holds, chulin, shenasa al taras hakodesh. A person that eats chulin and he's careful with his chulin on the same level as kachim, kekodesh damu. That it's considered to be tar like the level of kachim, like it was with Rabbi Yochanan or Yochanan ben Gudgede. Only for the carbon for the chatos, for the paradume, is it not considered to be kachim, tar that is. So we have the three opinions over here. Yeah, that's what we learned in the Mishnah. The paradum is on a higher level. Sagt the Gemara, Amar Rabbi Yonasan ben. Well, it's a machlokes. You have two opinions in the Braisa, and you have the Raya from a Mishnah. There are three opinions regarding a person that eats chulin al taras hakodesh. Does it stay like chulin? Does it have the level of truma or kachim? The Gemara starts a new Indian now. Amar Rabbi Yonasan ben Elazar nafla ma'afartoi heimenu. What happens if a person's handkerchief fell down from him? And Amalach Aveidoi, he told his friend, Tnali, pick it up and give it to me. V'nasnaloi, and he picked it up and he gave it to you. Tmeya, this handkerchief is going to be Tomei. So Rashi explains, what's the pshat in this? What's the reason for this? Even if the person that the handkerchief fell off from is tahir, and he's careful with all of his garments that it should be tahir, and the other person that's your friend, that you asked them to pick it up for you, is also tahir, but nevertheless, Rashi says, that we'll see soon, the Gemara will explain this, that when you have something that someone else, it's in someone else's hand, you don't protect it and you don't guard it from tumah, like something which is in your own hands. And therefore, there's a hesech hadas of this item that it could become susceptible to tumah. When you have something that belongs to you and you're careful with it, so then you're very careful with it and you make sure it shouldn't be tumah. When someone else your friend is holding something, we don't rely on you being careful for something else that your friend is holding for you. And if your friend knows that you're not careful with what he's holding for you, so then he's also not as careful as well. So this is the klal. Anytime someone else is holding something for you, it's considered to be a hesach hadas, and even if it's for a very short period of time, it's just picking it up for you and giving it to you. It doesn't matter. But hayesa went out of your hands, and now your friend is picking it up for you. There's a level of hesach hadas in this, and therefore it's going to be tameh. So this is going to be now the whole discussion of the Gemara over here about this. That this is a very big chumrah here. That because there's this level of hesach hadas, it's tameh. First, the Gemara brings another few statements that are similar to this, and then the Gemara is going to ask questions and discuss this. Rabbi Yonasan ben Amram. So Rabbi Yonasan ben Amram said a similar halacha. If a person made a mistake, instead of putting on his Shabbos clothing on Shabbos, so instead he put on his weekday clothing. So he put on weekday garments. Nitmu. So now these weekday garments will become tameh. So right now the Gemara is understanding the pshat in this is because a person is careful with whatever he's wearing in order to that it shouldn't become tameh, but that the shmira that a person has from tumah is only if he's aware, if he knows what he's wearing. If a person has something in his hands and he doesn't know what it is, it's something that it's not what he thought it is, we don't rely on the person's shmira that he's protecting it because it's not what he thought he has in his hands. Right, so the fact that it's something else, shmira of a person from tumah only applies when you're aware what you have. Mashenki, when a person thought he's putting on his Shabbosig garments and he's really putting on his chayil garments, his weekday garments, so that for that the shmira of the person does not apply. He didn't know what he's holding in his hands. Omar Rabbi Elazar bar Tzaddik. Now a similar statement. Rabbi Elazar bar Tzaddik said, "Ma'aseh b'shtei nashim." There was a story with two women, chaveiros, they were friends. Shenischalfu and kleim v'veis hamerchetz. That they, when they got dressed, so in the bathhouse, so their garments, their clothing, they exchanged their clothing, and each one put on from the other one. And then they came with Bab Ma'aseh Lifnei Rabbi Akiva. The story came to Rabbi Akiva, and the question was whether when each person is wearing the other person's clothing, could you rely on your shmira for these clothing that there's no hesach hadas and it remains tahir? And V'timon, and Rabbi Akiva said, because you're not wearing your own garments, you're wearing someone else's garments, so the level of shmira that there is for the tada of these garments is not enough. There's a level of hesach hadas here, and therefore it's going to be tomei. So basically, we have three different statements that are saying the same thing. Rabbi Yonasan ben Elazar, and Rabbi Yonasan ben Amram, and Rabbi Elazar bar Tzaddik. They're all three saying this point, that when a person is guarding something, and is being careful with something from tomeh, it's only if it's something that you have in your hands, and you know what it is, and it's yours, and you're protecting it, then the shmira applies that it's going to be tar. But if it's not in your hands, your friend has it in his hands, or even you yourself have it in your hands, but you don't know what it is, you mistook it for something else, the level of shmira is not the same, and therefore it's not going to be tar. So the Gemara asks on this, if this is true, let's take this a step further. If this premise is true, so if so, if a person stuck his hand into a basket and his intention was to take out bread, wheat bread, instead he didn't get wheat bread, but he took out barley bread. So hachanami, the nitmas, are you going to say the same thing? That because he took bread that was not his intention, so as the bread should become tameh? Just like you said, if a person wanted to wear Shabbos clothing and instead he put on weekday clothing because it's not what he wanted to put on, so the level of shmira is not the same. So say the same thing over here. I'm going to get to this. I'm going to get to any other case where a person takes something into his hand which was not his original intention. So the level of shmira is not the same and it should be tameh. And the Gemara says, and if you're going to say, yeah, maybe taka, that's the din, that it's going to be tameh because it's not what he thought he's taking into his hands. But Vatanya, we clearly learned in the Braise, a person that's guarding a barrel of wine. He thinks it's a barrel of wine, and he's protecting it from becoming tamei, and then he finds out that it's really not wine. What was it? It was oil. Tahira milatame. It's tight, it doesn't become tamei, it doesn't make anything tamei, which means the shmira of the person works even if he didn't know exactly what he has in his hands. He thought it's wine, it turns out to be oil, nevertheless it's still tired. So the same thing, a person thought he's taking bread, wheat bread, and it turns out to be barley bread, it should still be tired. And this is a question on the cases and everything that we said before. You thought you're putting on your garments, and you put on your friend's garments, or you thought you're putting on Shabbos clothing, and you put on weekday clothing, it should all be tired, like it says clearly in this Braisa. So the Gemara asks on this, but what does it say in that Braisa itself? According to your reasoning, the raya you're bringing from this Braisa, what does it say in the continuation of the Braisa? That because the person didn't know, he thought it was wine, and it turns out being oil, he's not allowed to eat this. Which means that it does become tamei. So the question is, why does it become tamei? If you just said that if you were protecting it from tamei, even if you didn't know what it is, it doesn't become tamei, so why would it be also to eat? So Amar Rabbi Yirmiyah, so the answer to this is, you have to say, Rabbi Yirmiyah said, Ba'omer shmartia midavar ametama, v'loi midavar hapaisla. The person says that when I was protecting this from tumah, I was only protecting it from a more severe tumah. Midavar ametama. Davar ametama means that it'll become tameh to the extent that it could make something else tameh. But v'loi midavar hapaisla. I was not protecting it from a lighter tumah that it itself would become tameh on a level that it can't make something else tameh. So for example, regarding chulin, that would mean a sheni l'tumah, which does not become a shlishi l'tumah. Or regarding truma, that would be a shlishi that does not become a revi. So the person said that I was protecting this barrel of wine for a lower level of tumah, but not for a higher level of tumah. That's why you're still not allowed to eat it. It became tameh, but it's not going to make anything else tameh. Now the Gemara questions this pshat of Rav Yirmiyah. Do we find such a concept that a person protects something from tumah and it's only a half protection, only for one level of tumah, not for another level of tumah? Could there be such a thing? I mean, l'chayri, you might say, if the person is careful that it shouldn't become tameh, it doesn't become tameh at all. If a person is not fully careful that it shouldn't become tameh, there's no such a thing that we could rely on a half protection for tumah. Once he's not fully protecting it from tumah, we have to be worried that it's going to become totally tameh. So is there such a thing, b'chlal? There could be a half protection of tumah.
If that's not going to become tameh, it's not going to make something else tameh also.
No, but there's two different levels of tumah. There's a sheni l'tumah, there's a shlishi l'tumah, there's a revi l'tumah.
Good. That's only if this made this tummy, this is going to make this tummy.
No.
But he's watching it. This shouldn't make this tummy.
I'm not sure what you're saying. Okay.
You're asking the question.
Frak the Gemara, is there such a thing as a half a tumah? So the Gemara brings a braise in. Yeah, we find such a thing of a half a tumah because Vatanya we learned in a braise hoishit yadei besal. A person stuck his hand into a basket. This lashon of sticking the hand to the basket, it's not really relevant for the hemshech here, but the Gemara says, what's the story with this basket? V'hasal al ksefai. He has a basket of, Rashi says, a basket of figs on his shoulder. V'hamagreifa b'toich hasal. And then he has this shovel that's inside the basket. So Rashi says this is a shovel that's usually used in an oven, but he's using this shovel here to separate the figs that are very sticky from one another. And in his heart, he was paying attention to protect the basket from becoming tameh. But he was not paying attention to make sure that the shovel that's inside it should not become tameh. So once the halacha, hasal toir, the basket that he's paying attention to will be toir, and the shovel that's inside will be tameh. So we see over here that a person can have a sort of a half a protection. He's protecting the sal itself, the basket, but not the magreifa, not the shovel that's inside. So the Gemara asks him this, hasal toir, but how could you differentiate? How could you say that the basket would be toir? To tame ha-magreifa l'sal. Let the magreifa, which is the shovel inside, since it becomes tameh, he was not careful with the magreifa, let that make the sal, the basket, tameh. So the Gemara says, no, that can't be. There's no such a thing. Ein keli metame keli. The halacha by tumah and tara is one keli that becomes tameh does not make another keli tameh. Fragt the Gemara, but v'li tameh mashe besal. Let the magreifa, the shovel, make tameh the food, the te'enim, the figs that are inside the basket. Why are we saying that only the magreifa becomes tameh? Amar Ravina, so Ravina answers, Ba'omer, it's when what we're talking about over here is, this person is saying, Shamartiv midavar shametamai. I'm protecting this magreifa, the shovel that's inside, from something that shouldn't make it tameh on a level of tameh that it can make the food, the figs, or the something else tameh. But v'lei midavar apaislai. I did not protect it from becoming tameh itself, that it should be tameh on a level that it can't make something else tameh. So that's the pshat in that braisa. So the point is, what do you see from this braisa? Person has a basket, then he has a shovel inside, and he's protecting and he's careful with the basket itself and with the figs that are inside, and they will not become tameh. Regarding the magreifa, he did not completely not pay attention to the magreifa. He's also making sure that it should not become tameh on a higher level, but he wasn't careful that it shouldn't become tameh, that it itself is tameh, which is called davar hapaislai. So I see this concept that a person can have a half a shmira for something. But after all of this, the Gemara comes back to the original question. Either way, the original question remains, what did it say in this braisa? That a person is carrying a barrel and he thinks it's a barrel of wine. Turns out to be a barrel of oil. So what does it say? Because he was protecting it, so his protection applies, it works, even though he didn't know what he was carrying. So this is a question on all the Amirayim or the Tanoim that said before that if you think that it's one thing and it's another thing, you thought it's Shabbos clothing and it's weekday clothing and it's switched garments, and then the Shemitah doesn't work. So why doesn't the Shemitah work? Here we see clearly in the Braisa that it does work. Another question. Huh?
didn't you answer that there was Mishamelet Medavar Metama only Medavar a place of Medavar Metama?
Yeah, okay. So whatever level of shmirah he wanted to make, it works. Even though he thought it's wine and it turns out to be oil. The level of shmirah that he did not want to do does not work. But whatever shmirah, chatzain, half a shmirah, whatever shmirah of tumah he wanted to do works, even though he made a mistake with what he's holding in his hands. And before we said, if you don't know what you're holding in your hands, the shmirah does not work. Another question Rabbi Baravua asked, and what we said before, there was a story with a woman, she came to Rabbi Shmuel, and she told Rabbi Shmuel, Rabbi, beged ze araktiv betara. This beged, I was careful when I was weaving it that it should be pure. Okay, what does this mean? So Rashi says when you begin weaving a beged, so it's not makabel tumah yet until it becomes at least the minimum size of 3 by 3 finger breadths. So she's telling Rabbi Shmuel that no tumah touched it. I know that no tumah touched it, but then she adds right away and she says, "But v'loy haya belibi l'shoymroi betara." But I did not consciously pay attention to protect it from anything that it shouldn't become tameh. She's saying that I know that I was tired, but she didn't consciously pay attention to do shmireh from anything else coming into contact with it. That's what she tells Rabbi Shmuel. So now Rabbi Shmuel heard that. What did he say? So Rabbi Shmuel started interrogating her and asking her, what did you do? Who was with you? And what happened? Because she claims that it's still tahir, but she didn't consciously make an effort and pay attention to be shaymer it, to protect it. So he was asking her all kinds of questions. Amr Alai, so one of the things she said to him is, Rabbi, Nida mashcha imi bechevel. Together with me, there was another woman that was a nida that was pulling the chevel, the rope that was needed to tie it to the weaving process. So what do you see over here? She didn't even realize that she had a friend that was with her that was a nida that did make a tummy. So when Rabbi Shmuel heard this, Amar Rabbi Shmuel, Kama gedailim divrei chachamim. Look how great the words of the chachamim are. Shahayu aimrim, the chachamim said, Bilibay l'shaymrai, if you consciously pay attention to do shmireh, to protect it from any tumah, then toir. Then it'll be toir. Ein bilibay l'shaymrai tameh. But if you do not consciously pay attention that it shouldn't become tameh, so then it's going to be tameh. The fact that she said that she knows it's toir, that's not good enough. She has to actually do shmireh. Shuv ma'ase b'shachas. One second. Let's first see one more story in this brayse, and then I'll explain what the question is. Shuv ma'ase b'shachas. There was a story similar with another woman. Shabas lefnei Rabbi Shmuel. She came to Rabbi Shmuel. Amra Allah, and she says to Rabbi Shmuel, Rabbi, my Rebbe, mappa zu araktiya betara. This mappa, this tablecloth, I wove it, and it's all tar. But I did not consciously pay attention to be sure to protect it from any tumah. So again, the mitoich bedika is shahaya Rabbi Shmuel baitka. Rabbi Shmuel was interrogating her about exactly what she did and what happened. Amr Aloi, she said to him, Rabbi nimon niftakali. I had a thread that got caught, kshartia bepeh, and I tied it together with my mouth. And as Rashi explains, when she did this, she was a nida. But she thought that it's not a problem because this was before she began weaving it into a garment. Again, a garment is only mekabel tumah if it's the minimum size of 3 by 3 finger breadths. So she used her mouth to tie together this nima, this thread, before it was yet the minimum size of a garment. And at that point, she was still a nida. And she tifled herself and she started weaving this garment. So the concern over here is that, as Rashi explains, that because when she was a nida, she tied it with her mouth, and so it could be it was still moist even afterwards when she started already making it into a garment. And if it's still moist of the spit of a nida, it would make that whole garment tummy. So she didn't pay attention. So Rabbi Shmuel, again Rabbi Shmuel said, Kama gedailim divrei chachamim, how great is the words of the chachamim, shayaimrim, belibay l'shoymrei toir. Chachamim said, only if the person paid attention to do shmireh, then it's toir. Ein belibay l'shoymrei tameh. But if you don't pay attention consciously that you're going to do shmireh on something, then it's going to be tameh. So Rashi explains, what's the question from this brayse? The brayse says very clearly, if belibay l'shoymrei, the main thing is that you consciously are paying attention to do shmireh. That's it. And if you pay attention to do shmireh, it's going to be toir. So this is a contradiction to what we said before. Before we said paying attention consciously to be shaymer something is not good enough. If you're making a mistake regarding what you're holding in your hands, You think it's Shabbos clothing and it's weekday clothing. Or there's your friend is picking it up, or they exchange their garments in the bathhouse, it's not going to be a good Shemitah. Why not? It says here in the Braisa, as long as you're consciously paying attention to do the Shemitah, it's good enough. So now the Gemara answers and explains. So what Rabbi Elazar bar Tzaddik says, which was the women that exchanged their garments in the bathhouse, over there, that we could understand that case is different. Because each one will say to themselves, Chavirasi Eishes Amaretz. My friend, she's not on the level, she b'chlal is not careful from things becoming tamei, she's the wife of an Amaretz. Or mascha daitam, So therefore she totally removed her entire das of protecting it from any tara whatsoever. When she realizes that she exchanged garments with her friends, she says, oy vey, my friend is a wife of an Amaretz, and forget it. There's no shmira on that from any tumah. So over there, because they exchanged garments, there's no shmira at all anymore. So that's the answer according to Rabbi Elazar bar Tzaddik. Let Rabbi Yonasan ben Amram Nami. What did Rabbi Yonasan ben Amram say? A person that wanted to put on Shabbos clothing and instead he put on weekday clothing. We could also say that you lost the level of shmira here. Kiven the kelim the Shabbos avud lehushim or tfei. The nature of a person is that for Shabbos clothing, because of the kedusha of Shabbos, a person is protecting his Shabbos clothing more. So therefore, Masech Daite Minayu, when he realizes that he's wearing weekday garments, so the level of the Shmireh for weekday garments is not the same like it is for Shabbos garments. So you can't say it's the same thing, it's a mistake that he's wearing something else. The level of Shmireh is not the same. So therefore, that's not a question. But according to Rabbi Yonasan ben Elazar, Navid Luhu Shimor b'yadei dechavre. So he was speaking about a case where a handkerchief fell off of your head, and you asked your friend to pick up the handkerchief for you. So l'chayre, the level of shmirah should be the same, that the person is guarding it when someone else is picking it up for you. So why shouldn't we say that once you have a shmirah, when your friend is picking it up for you, so it's good enough to protect it from any tumah? Just like we see over here, that as long as you're consciously being careful with it, so then it's protected from tumah. Rabbi Yochanan explains, Chazakeh, we have a Chazakeh, that Ein Adam Mishamer Ma Shebiyad Chaveiroi. A person cannot protect something from Tumah when it's in his friend's hands. That's the Chazakeh. So therefore over here, once your friend picks it up for you, we apply that Chazakeh, even if it's just for a moment, your friend is picking it up for you, the shmirah that you can do in something is only something that you have in your hands. Something that's in someone else's hands, you can't do shmirah for that. And therefore even your friend is not protected for you either, and there's no shmirah. Like the Gemara Veloy, there's no shmirah even when it's in someone else's hands. But Vatanya, we learned in Abraisa, Harei shehoyu chamarov upoyalov tu'unin taris. A person has workers, a donkey driver, or other workers, they're amaratzim, and they are carrying taris for you. That Rashi says they're carrying barrels of wine, and these are barrels of wine that are klicheres, earthenware, so unless you touch it inside, it does not become tamei. Klicheres does not become tamei on the outside. So even though they're amaratzim and they're tamei, but they're not touching it on the inside, they're just transporting it for you. So the Braisa here says, Afal pi shehiflig mehen, even if you went far away from them, yoser mimil, even more than a mil, so you can't really see what they're doing. Nevertheless, ta'araisav tahiris, this wine that they were carrying for you, which is tahir, will remain tahir. So what do you see over here? That even though they are carrying it for you, nevertheless, we rely on the fact that it's going to be protected for you. So that's a question of what we just said, that when your friend picks something up for you, you can't protect something which is in your friend's hand. But then the Braisa says, Vim amal lahem, if he tells them, L'chu, go ahead of me, and I will come after you. Kivin shenis almo einav mehen, so once they can't see each other anymore, so then ta'areis of tameis, what they are holding in their hands is going to be tamei, because they can't see each other anymore. So the question, like I said, is why in the Reisha of this Braisa does it say that they can carry it for you and it'll still be tar? How could it still be tar if it's not in your hands? We said you could only protect something from tumah if you are holding it in your own hands. Now, according to one Gears in the Gemara, Rashi takes out these words. Maishna Reisha or Maishna Seifa. What should be the difference between the Reisha and the Seifa? So Rashi says, if you guide us these words, what the Gemara is saying is, just like in the Seifa it says that it's Tamei, the same should be in the Reisha, because of the rule that we said that once it's out of your hands, you can't protect it anymore. Answers the Gemara, Rav Yitzchak Nafches. Rav Yitzchak Nafche answers, Reisha, what the Reisha is speaking about is, B'metayer chamarov upayalov. Usually, you can't protect something from tumah when it's in the hands of your friends. But over here, these people that are holding it for you don't need any shmirah. Why not? Because right before they went and took it from you to transport it for you, they went and he toiveled them for this. He toiveled them especially for this. So then you could rely on them that when they're carrying it, that they're not going to make it tummy. He toiveled them. If that's the case in the ratio of this Mishnah that he toiveled them for this, so seifa nami. So the Sefer as well, I should say the same thing when it says over there that he told him, go ahead and I'm going to come behind you. But if he toiveled them especially for this, so then what is there to be concerned about? That they're going to make it tameh. Answers the Gemara, the reason is because an amoret that's transporting this barrel of wine, even though he himself, you toiveled him in the mikveh, but he's not particular with not allowing a friend of his to come and touch the wine. So therefore, if he's going ahead of you and you can't see them, you have to be concerned that maybe a friend will touch this wine. So you should have the same concern in the Reisha as well when you can't see them anymore. Answers the Gemara, because in the Reisha, even though you can't see them anymore, but the Amaretz will be careful because you could suddenly appear, coming out of a narrow road or a crooked way, you could suddenly appear and see what they're doing, so therefore they're still afraid of him. Why don't we say the same thing in the Sefer, that these people that are transporting the barrels of wine for you are afraid that you're going to see what they're doing and they're not going to let anyone touch the wine? Answers the Gemara, the chiluk is, Kivin the Amar Lahu. In the Sefer, he said to the people that are transporting for him, Luchu, you can go, Vani avay achareichem, and I will come after you. So because he said such a lashon, you can go ahead and I will come later, Mismach samcha datayu. So they become very comfortable, they're relying on themselves, that the person is not going to appear suddenly, and therefore we're afraid that they're going to allow their friends to touch it in the time when they're transporting it. Hadran alach ein darshe. This is the conclusion of the second Perek of Masechta Chagigah. Okay, let's begin the third Perek. Sagt der Heilige Mishnah, this is continuing the halachis of the chumris that we said before, where Chazal were machmer, that the higher the level you go, when kachim is higher than truma and so on, so there's a higher level of chumrah that Chachamim applied. These are all chumris midrabanan. Sagt der Mishnah, chaymer ba'kodesh mi betruma. There is an additional stringency in kachim more than truma. And the Mishnah here is going to mention 11 different stringencies that there are by kachim more than truma. So the first thing is shemat bilin kalim b'toich kalim l'truma. So for truma, when you're toiveling something in the mikveh, you can put one vessel inside another, and they're both tamei, and you can toivel them that way. Avaloi l'kaidish, but for kachim not. The Gemara will explain the kachim. There's a chumrah. We're afraid of the chatzitza that you have to toivel each keli separately. Another halacha achirayim v'toich ubeis hatzbita. Different sections of a keli, the outside of a keli, the inside, and the beis hatzbita, which is the handle of a keli. B'truma. So regarding truma, so if it's a tumah midrabanan and only one section of the keli became tamei, the other part of the keli does not become tamei. So Rashi explains it's only talking about a truma midrabanan. By a truma min atayra, if one part of the keli becomes tamei, for sure the whole keli will be tamei. But by a truma midrabanan, so even if one part of the keli is tamei, it doesn't mean the rest of the keli is tamei. Avaloi b'kodesh, but not by kachim. By kachim, even if it's a tumah midrabanan, one part becomes tamei, the whole thing is tamei. Another halacha, another chumrah, hanoises hamedris. If a person is carrying something which is tamei medris, tamei from a zav, noises a truma. At the same time, he could also carry in another hand something which is from truma. Right? So Rashi says, as long as you're carrying another barrel of wine, let's say, which is an earthenware keli, as long as it doesn't touch the inside of that earthenware keli, it's not going to become tamei. So therefore, you're allowed to carry tumah in one hand, and you could at the same time you can carry also a barrel of wine, and we're not concerned that it'll become tamei. Avaloi es kodesh, but not by kodesh. By kodesh the b'machmi, you shouldn't carry these two things at the same time. Another chumrah, big day oichel, this is we had already before, big day oichle truma, the garments of a person that's eating truma, and he's careful with the tara for the level of truma, madras l'kodesh. It's still considered to be tamei for a person that's eating kachim. Another chumrah, and here the Mishnah gives an introduction. It's interesting that the Mishnah gives the introduction right over here. Loi ki midas hakodesh, midas hatruma. It's not the same, the level of Tara and the Chumras that there are for Kachim, like the level of Chumra that there is for Truma. Shebekaidesh, so when it comes to Kachim, matter. So if you have a garment of Kaidesh that has a knot in it, you have to untie the knot to be sure that the water will go into every place. Umenagiv, and you also have to dry it up in order that the water of the mikveh should come into every area. And then umatpul, and then you tovel it. And v'achakach kaisher, then after the tefillah you can tie it again. But when it comes to truma, we're not so stringent. Kaisher, you can tie it before, even if it had a knot from before, you can leave it that way. And v'achakach matpul, and you can tovel it with the knot, and even if it was moist, if it wasn't totally dry from before, you can tovel it that way. Another chumre, kelim anigmarim betare. Kelim, a keli is only mekabel tumah when it's done, when it's actually a keli. Before it's a full keli, it's done yet. It's not going to be toyer. It's not going to be susceptible to tumah. So a keli that was finished betare and you made it with full tara, for every other level, it's good. It's going to be toyer. But tzrichin tvila lekaidish. For the level of kachim, it's still going to need tvila. The Rebbe once quoted this lashon of the Mishnah. When you get to a person's Aveda, in Avedas Hashem, you could say the same thing, that even if a person thinks that he's in a level where he's perfect already, he's Nigbar Betara, everything he does is perfect on his level, but he should always know that there's a higher level of Tefillah, which Tefillah also means Bittul, that you could dedicate yourself to the Eibishter, even on a higher level, to go to the level of Kachim, of Kaidish. Avalayla Truma. By Truma, there's no additional requirement to Tevel HaKeli after it was completed Betara. Another chumrah, hakeli mitzarav masha b'toichel lekeidish. Regarding kachim, if you have a keli and it has different fruits or whatever it is inside of it, it combines everything regarding kachim that it all becomes tummy together. If one thing is tummy, everything else is tummy inside of it. Avaloyla truma, not for truma. For truma, if it touched one thing in the keli, so that thing will be, let's say, a rishon l'tumah. The next item will be a sheni, and the next one will be a shlishi. It doesn't become all one. Another chumrah, haravi b'kaidesh pasal. Regarding kachim, the tumah goes to the level of revi, even a revi betumah. V'ashlishi betruma. Regarding truma, it only goes to the level of shlishi letruma, not past that. Another chumrah, or batruma im nitmes achas miyadav. By truma, if one of the person's hands became tameh, so this is talking about a tumah midrabanan, where a person's only the hand becomes tameh. So if only one hand became tameh, chaverta tahira, the other hand is still tahir. Ubakaidesh, but when it comes to kaidesh, matbil shteyen. You have to tovel both hands, shayat, metames, chaverta bekaidesh. Avaloi betruma. Only by kachim, if one hand became tameh, the other hand is tameh as well, but not by truma. Oichlin neguvim biyadayim mesuaves betruma. Regarding truma, you can eat food with your hands, which were not washed, with your hands that are tameh. All the hands of a person are always a sheni l'tumah. So you can eat any food as long as it's dry foods. It never became susceptible to tumah because it didn't come into contact with liquid. That's the condition for it to become susceptible to tumah. So you can eat any foods that are dry with your hands, which are sheni l'tumah. So that's for truma. Avaloi b'kaidish, but not by kachim. Even dry foods, you can't eat it with your hands that are sheni l'tumah. The final chumrah of the Mishnah, ha'aynin u'mechusik kipurim. A person that's an aynin, a close relative passed away, and he couldn't eat from kachim, but he did not become tameh. We're not talking about a aynin that actually became tameh. Or a mechusik kipurim, which is someone that was tameh, but he already went to the mikveh. And the only thing that was missing is that on the day following the mikveh, he has to bring a carbon, and he didn't bring his carbon yet. Tzrichin tvila lekaidish. After you bring your carbon, or after this aynan is not an aynan anymore, he's going to have to go to the mikveh again. By the mechusik kipurim, he's going to the mikveh again in order to be able to eat from kachim. Avaloi letruma. But by truma, you don't have this additional chumrah, the fact that he went to the mikveh before by the mechusik kipurim, or by the aynan, he never became tameh in the first place, so there's no additional chumrah for him to go to the mikveh.